Here's a guy that would rather spray it than say it. Here's your look at the brand new Mattel Master Universe new Eternia, the Mattel Creations Snout Spout. Snout Spout, the Eternian firefighting cyborg, is back and bigger than ever. This oversized Masterverse figure of the heroic firefighter towers over most villains. With a removable water tank and hoses, along with his iconic axe, he can douse fires and evildoers with his water blast effect. An elephant never forgets to prevent forest fires. Or is that a grizzly bear? Either way, just before, of course, we get a closer look at the Mattel Master Universe Masterverse Snout Spout. I'm going to grab the tape measure just to tell us that the figure stands at 7.5 inches in height, or its snout spout is 19 centimeters tall. Once again, I'd like to thank Daryl for hooking me up here with Snout Spout. He was the same individual, in fact, that provided both the Rokon and the Cyclone that we looked at earlier this week. The figure for Snout Spout, though, was a Mattel Creations site exclusive. In other words, though, the only way that you could get this figure was to go over to Mattel's site at the time that the listing went up and hope that you could get in there and add this guy to your cart. The price for him, at least in Canadian, was $49, which, again, wasn't a bad price at all. But by the time that I found out that Snout Spout was going live, the vultures, unfortunately, had already swooped in and scooped up all the available quantities. Bringing in a couple of figures now for comparisons, just to show you how tall Snout Spout actually is. Here's what the figure looks like with the earlier looked at Battle Armor He-Man. Here's what he also looks like with Man-at-Arms. And we're going to bring in a couple of Masterverse figures, if I can actually get Man-at-Arms to stand. Here's what he looks like with Ram-Man. Off the other side, here's what he looks like with Many Faces. Bringing in Mechaneck. We also looked at Mechaneck not too long ago. And obviously, if we're going to be looking at a current version of Snout Spout, then it would obviously make most sense to bring in the original Origins Snout Spout. So you can see what he looks like with that. I think it's time that we discuss the elephant in the room and the accessories that come included with him. Snout Spout comes with mostly upgrades from the original Vintage and Origins version of Snout Spout, like, for example, his Battle Axe. Just to bring in the one that we got from the original Origins line, it's pretty much the same idea, although what's missing, unfortunately, here on the original Origins one is that it did have the prong piece to hold up his snout. Unfortunately, though, the Masterverse version doesn't have that at all. With looking at the bottom of it and assuming that that hole meant that there was something that was supposed to go inside of it, I went back and checked the white baggie, just thinking I was leaving off something inside of it, and sure enough, there wasn't. I think, if at the very least, Mattel probably could have included a little prong piece that could have plugged into the end of the handle if you wanted to have it flipped around and holding up the trunk that way. Either way, though, he does hold it in his hands. The one good thing about it is there's also storage space on the back of his body as well. The fact that the figure also comes included with a backpack. Now, there is some assembly that's already required. I've already taken the liberty of adding the bottom hoses. I would have taken these off, but once you get them firmly rooted on the bottom of it, they're next to impossible to remove without worrying that you're going to be breaking them. So I just left them in as they were. I mean, obviously, I would have had to attach them on the bottom here. The only thing I haven't yet attached, and I had attached earlier, is this piece on the end. Now, this is the part that's going to be shorter of, obviously, if you're looking at them, it's about a third the length. This is going to plug on the end. I don't think it does really matter. I mean, if you're looking at the pegs seem to be the same size and shape. This just dowels into the top like this, and that's going to plug onto the back of the figure's body, more specifically his head. Looking at the back of this, actually just before that, looking at the front, I do like that he's got these little water tanks showing you the varying lengths of water that he has left in his reserves. I think that's a nice touch. You can also as well take the axe, and the axe fits just nicely on the side there, so there's some nice storage there too. Let's take the axe off for at least right now. Take Snout Spout, spin him around on the back, and you'll see there's holes on the back of his armor. You take these, what I thought would have been very small pegs, thinking maybe they need to be a lot longer. I was surprised how securely these attach onto the back of his armor here. These just plug in place, and I assure you, though, once they're in place, you're going to have a hard time to remove them. I have no real intentions of actually taking them back off, so we're just going to plug it in place just like that. And like I said, it's pretty secure. The only thing then left to do is you've got yourself the hoses. The shorter one is going to plug in. There's a little hole on the back of his head, so that just plugs in like this. You don't have to plug it in if you'd like to just leave it off, although that's the thing that's really giving him his water supply. So we're just going to plug in the back of his head like that. And then these pieces, just bring his arms up just a little bit here, spin the figure around, and located on the front of his belt, you can see there's a plug there and there's a plug there. These just loop in place, and they don't stay on very well, but I guess that's a good thing. I would have rather that than having holes on the sides of his belt similar to this. If you ever wanted to detach them, you'd have a harder time to do it. I mean, they hold on well enough. I mean, if you bang and move, like if you're moving like the torso around, for example, sometimes you may clip these, but they hold on generally quite good. A nice little touch of detail I really also like too is that it shows a water meter on the front just to show you how much water he's got left in his tank. That's really neat, the fact that they would incorporate that. The original Snout Spout, or at least the closest one I have right now, is the Origins one. You can see he never really had that. So it's a nice little welcomed upgrade that he had on this one that wasn't, again, on the original vintage release. The other thing, again, one thing that with the figure too, is that if you look at the back, we can go ahead and put his axe back in place here. There we go. So like I said, storage-wise, it does hold the axe. I mean, it doesn't really matter which way that you have it. You want to have it facing the opposite way, you can do that as well. Although doing it this way, you can see like the handle, the part that fits around his hand, is going to get a little bit more closer in quarters. So it's probably a better idea to plug it in this, although it's, like I said, it's pretty close to his ears. But I do like the idea that he has everything stored away. There's nothing that really is left behind. The only other thing that the figure has, let's just get him a stand here. Obviously, having all this stuff on the back of his body is going to add some back heaviness. The figure also comes included with closed fists. I have no plans at all of ever displaying the figure with the closed fists. I do appreciate, of course, they're there, but yeah, I don't really need them. The last thing that I think is really neat, though, is that he does actually have a water blast effect. It's all been accomplished here by using a translucent blue plastic, and that basically just attaches onto the end of his nozzle. Just like that. I kind of wish that in a way they could have made it a little bit more, I mean, like having like mist or like, you know, sometimes when you see like exploding effects and they're kind of like a starburst effect, I kind of wish that for the amount of force that's probably coming out of his trunk, that they would have had a little bit of, again, like, you know, again, like a little bit of a starburst effect, so it's not simply just a steady stream of water. The fact that they actually still included that, though, is a really nice touch. So let's go ahead and just remove everything right now. I'm going to leave the backpack on for obvious reasons. I prefer really to have the figure displayed with that. And again, if you wanted to see what he looks like, you can take yourself the axe, and that axe just fits into his hand. There is also one other place here. There's a hole there on the front of his body that I thought had a plan or a purpose. I'm looking around, though. I even looked at images online and even on the back of the packaging. I think the hole is just supposed to be there. I don't think it serves any real purpose. It's not like you can actually take the hose and plug it in the front. Probably the same way that the same logic is there's a hole on the bottom again of the handle, but it doesn't serve any purpose that I've been able to see. Taking the axe out of his hand, and we'll just put it off to the side. Let go, let go. There we go. Bringing back in the original Snout Spout, one thing that's very apparent is the fact they decided to change up the colors. I kind of wish in a way that they could have kept the colors a little bit more closer to the darker orange that the original Snout Spout would have been, in favor of not going the light yellow color that they actually ended up going with. He also has added some additional bandage. You can see bands there on his legs, for example. The original Snout Spout wouldn't have had that. And changing out the colors of the boots are very ever apparent. They did their best to kind of keep the glove color somewhat similar. Although, again, I think that I would have preferred the darker color myself. It's the only thing I would have said from Snout Spout's standpoint. I do wish that the figure was a little bit more accurately colored to the original Snout Spout. I do like the colors. I just kind of wish that the colors, again, were a little bit more closer to the original. The neat thing about Snout Spout, though, is that he does also have light piping. You can probably already see that he's got slight translucency and yellow eyes. If we take ourselves a lamp source, I'm just using my black light for right now, I'm going to shine it on the back. You can see how brightly those illuminate. Very nice effect. It might even be, could it be the only Master of the Universe figure that we've ever gotten that has light piping? Possibly. I do like the idea that they incorporate that on the back of the figure's head. There's also some surprisingly interesting articulation that the figure also has as well. I mean, obviously, he already has a trunk, but the trunk is nicely done where it's got sectional articulated joints. So there's a joint here, 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 and here. So between all of those, you can bring the snout all the way up if you wanted to. The trunk moves down. I mean, obviously, we're going to look more at that in a moment when we look at the figure's articulation. But the trunk itself does have some really decent articulation. Really nice to see that. He also has very surprising articulation in his tusks. Wasn't expecting that either as well. And he also has articulation here in his ears. So you can also hinge those out also as well. Again, we're going to talk more about that in a moment. For the rest of the details on the figure, again, overall, really happy with how this one was done. Even though he does really have the little meter there on the front that's going to spin around depending on how much water he's got left. Technically, underneath that, he still has somewhat of a familiar belt that the original Snout Spout would have had. You guys can probably even see it for yourself. Again, down below, he's got a very large presence going for him. He's a very equally heavy figure, too. Something also that they incorporated to this figure is with shoulder pads. The original Snout Spout wouldn't have had that, but they did a nice enough job to match it to the coloring on the back of his backpack. Again, overall, a really nice-looking figure. Now, for the figure's articulation, going back to his head sculpt here, despite for the fact he does have this hose connecting on the back of the figure's head, it doesn't limit at all the articulation. In fact, moving his head back and forth, I have no problems whatsoever. You can move it up, you can move it down. You can't obviously move it back and forth too much just because he's got the big ears on the sides. Speaking of his ears, though, there's a hinge joint, so you can bring the ears forward and back. There's, again, tusk swivelage. That's nice to see. And again, like the actual trunk itself does swivel back and forth. These all independently swivel, and then you can also hinge them back and forth. See, there's the hinges on the inside there. So it's good range of motion there for the actual trunk. Upper torso is going to be on a bulge, right? So you can rotate that all the way around. The arms do come out, and even though he's got shoulder pads, they don't get in the way at all of being able to move his arms. Freely. You can move his arms forward and back. He's got a bicep swivel. The figure has only, sadly, a single hinge on the elbow, but that usually is the territory when it comes to Masterverse figures. Swiveling back and forth on his arms, and the hands do rotate all the way around. For Snout Spout's lower half, the figure does have a splits on the legs. One thing he also has, though, is the drop-down legs. So you can actually bring them down if you want to have a further reach forward on the legs. And it's just a case of popping those legs back in place. Popping those back in place sometimes do result in popping the belts off. So again, we're just going to put that back on the peg. Figure has a swivel there in the thigh. The figure has a double hinge on the knee. Articulation here swiveling on the boot, as well as an ankle pivot up back and forth this way, and an ankle rocker as well. My takeaway from this is a decent looking Snout Spout. I'm really glad that I had the chance to get this one. I was really glad, in fact, again, like Daryl was able to hook me up on getting that Snout Spout. Again, to bring back in the original one, there are, again, few cosmetic changes that they did change. I mean, obviously, if you're a purist, I kind of like more the traditional colors of Snout Spout. I was a little disappointed the fact that Mattel decided not to keep the colors, the consistent orange and the consistent pink on his belt, on his gloves, and obviously keeping the colors of his boots black, I think also would have worked a nice way as well. Considering really, when you're looking at also his boots are a dark purple. They don't quite match the colors of like his belt. Like that, you can see like with his belt on the Origins, it matches the colors of the boots. Other than maybe keeping the colors the same as the original Origins one, I couldn't be any bit happier with how Snout Spout turned out. Again, this one was unfortunately a Mattel Creations exclusive. Other than that, I mean, obviously it's sold out over on their site. So the only way now to get this guy for yourself is, unless you have somebody like a Daryl that's able to hook you up, your best bet might now be to go to places like eBay and pay a little bit extra for it. But even if you are paying a little bit extra to get your hands on Snout Spout, I don't think you'll be disappointed at all once you receive him. The creators of Master Universe were smart enough to take an elephant and turn him into Eternian Firefighter. Mattel was smart enough, though, to take the original Origins and vintage design of Snout Spout and make him bigger, make him better, and make him a Mattel Creations release. The figure is definitely oversized from all the other Masterverse figures, and that's a good thing. I mean, if you're going to be an elephant, you really want to be the biggest character on the shelf, and he certainly is that. The upgrades are ever apparent. I mean, obviously, the costume is one of the biggest things that are changed between this one and the original vintage and the Origins. Maybe not to a better thing. I kind of wish in a way that the colors were a little bit more closer to the originals, but I guess change is good too. I mean, obviously the positive changes are the fact he has actually visible water wells on the back of his tank. That's a nice touch. Having the little hoses attached to the front of his belt with a little water meter for a belt buckle, that's probably the coolest feature on the figure. And the fact he does also have an articulated trunk that also has a water blast effect that can attach onto the end of it is really the thing that makes Snout Spout a home run hit. Sadly, though, again, like this guy was a Mattel creation. So again, the only way that you could have gotten your hands on this guy is one of two. You obviously could have been able and lucky enough to get him first when he was listed on their site. If not for that, you might have to pay the extra additional prices. Snout Spout, I think right now going online, he's going for anywhere from $80 to $120, depending on who's listing it and depending on how much they think they can get out of that figure. I think he's definitely worth it, especially if you're a big fan of the character, like I'm a big fan of the character. Like I said, other than the color scheme not quite jiving with the original one, Snout Spout is a really nice looking figure. What do you guys think of him? Let me know down below in the comments section. Have you guys had the chance to pick up the Mattel Creation Snout Spout? Or is it a figure that's going to be now on your hunt list? I mean, is this going to be a figure that you're going to be looking for? Let me know down below your feelings on the figure in the comments section. If you guys did also enjoy this video, I want to hit it with like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and would like to stick around for more, if you haven't already done so, obviously make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. And you're also making sure, of course, you're turning on bell notification. And just before, of course, we wrap things up, once again, a big thank you to Daryl for hooking me up with Snout Spout here. If you guys did want to stick around for more videos here on this channel, we are going to be looking at some more Master Universe stuff. And of course, within that, sprinkled within there, there's always going to be new content coming your way. 2 videos a day, Monday to Friday. Always new stuff for you guys to be checking out. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.